Commander Sarah Mitchell stood at attention in the briefing room of Naval Base San Diego, her uniform crisp and her posture perfect, despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. At 32, she had earned her rank through 15 years of dedicated service, starting as an enlisted sailor and working her way up through sheer determination and exceptional performance. Her expertise in naval intelligence and strategic planning had made her one of the youngest commanders in the Pacific Fleet, but today she felt the weight of every challenge she had faced to get here. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the operations center as Sarah reviewed the mission briefings that had consumed her last 72 hours. She had been working around the clock to coordinate a complex joint operation involving multiple SEAL teams, intelligence assets, and international partners. The mission was critical, a high-value target extraction in a hostile region that required precise timing and flawless execution. Sarah had spent months developing the operational framework, studying satellite imagery, analyzing intelligence reports, and coordinating with various military units. Her attention to detail was legendary among her peers, and her ability to see patterns others missed had saved countless lives in previous operations. The SEAL teams respected her tactical mind and trusted her judgment completely. Admiral Robert Hawthorne entered the briefing room with his typical commanding presence. At 58, he was a decorated veteran with an impressive record, but he belonged to an older generation of naval officers who still questioned whether women had a place in combat operations. His traditional views had been shaped by decades of service in an exclusively male environment, and he struggled to adapt to the changing dynamics of modern military service. The Admiral's piercing blue eyes swept across the room, taking in the assembled officers and enlisted personnel who had gathered for the final mission briefing. His gaze lingered on Sarah with what she recognized as barely concealed skepticism. She had encountered this look many times before, the subtle suggestion that she didn't belong, that her presence was somehow diminishing the seriousness of military operations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Hawthorne began, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in the Navy. "We're here to discuss Operation Neptune's Trident, a mission that will require the highest level of precision and professionalism from every person involved." Sarah listened intently as the Admiral outlined the basic parameters of the mission, noting how he glossed over many of the tactical details she had spent weeks perfecting. She had anticipated this meeting would be challenging, but she was prepared to defend her operational plan and ensure the mission's success. The briefing room was filled with some of the Navy's most elite personnel. SEAL Team 6 members sat in the front rows, their quiet confidence evident in their relaxed but alert postures. These were men who had served in the most dangerous situations imaginable, and they had learned to respect competence regardless of rank or gender. Lieutenant Commander Jake Reaper Rodriguez, the team leader, had worked with Sarah on 3 previous missions and had complete confidence in her abilities. Behind the SEALs sat intelligence officers, communication specialists, and support personnel who would play crucial roles in the mission's success. Many of them had served under Sarah's command before and knew her reputation for thorough preparation and calm decision-making under pressure. As Admiral Hawthorne continued his presentation, Sarah noticed subtle inconsistencies in his timeline and resource allocation. She had identified these potential issues weeks ago and had developed contingency plans to address them. Her comprehensive mission folder contained detailed solutions for every scenario the Admiral was now describing as problematic. "The intelligence picture remains somewhat unclear," the Admiral stated, displaying a map on the large screen at the front of the room. "We'll need to rely on real-time updates and adaptive tactics once our teams are in position." Sarah shifted slightly in her chair, knowing that her intelligence analysis had actually provided a remarkably clear picture of the operational environment. She had spent countless hours correlating satellite data, human intelligence reports, and signals intelligence to create a comprehensive understanding of the target area. Her work had eliminated much of the uncertainty the Admiral was describing. Lieutenant Rodriguez exchanged a quick glance with his teammates, his expression suggesting he was thinking the same thing Sarah was. The SEAL teams had been thoroughly briefed on Sarah's intelligence package, and they felt confident about the mission parameters she had established. The tension in the room was subtle, but noticeable to those who knew what to look for. Sarah maintained her professional composure, but she could feel the familiar frustration building inside her chest. She had faced this situation many times before. Male superiors who seemed determined to undermine her expertise or minimize her contributions to important operations. Admiral Hawthorne clicked to the next slide, which showed the proposed timeline for the mission. Sarah immediately noticed that he had altered several key elements of her original plan without consulting her or the tactical teams that would be executing the operation. The changes introduced unnecessary risks and eliminated some of the carefully planned safety margins she had built into the operation. "The extraction timeline will need to be compressed," the Admiral announced. "We can't afford to have our people exposed in hostile territory any longer than absolutely necessary." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The Admiral's proposed timeline eliminated crucial contingency periods she had included to account for unexpected delays or complications. Her experience in operational planning had taught her that rushing complex missions usually led to mistakes that could cost lives. She raised her hand slightly, preparing to voice her concerns about the timeline modifications. The Admiral noticed her gesture, but continued speaking as if he hadn't seen it. Sarah waited patiently, knowing that interrupting a senior officer during a briefing would be inappropriate regardless of the importance of her input. The SEAL team members were also noticing the discrepancies between the Admiral's presentation and the detailed briefings they had received from Sarah. Their experience had taught them to trust the intelligence officer who had done the groundwork, and they could see that the Admiral was making changes that didn't improve the mission's chances of success. "Furthermore," Admiral Hawthorne continued, "I have concerns about the complexity of the coordination required for this operation. Perhaps we should consider a more straightforward approach that doesn't rely so heavily on precise timing and multiple moving parts." Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly. The Admiral was essentially criticizing the core methodology of her operational plan without offering any substantive improvements. The complexity he was referring to was actually a series of carefully orchestrated elements designed to maximize the mission's success while minimizing risk to personnel. The room remained silent as the Admiral continued his critique of various aspects of the mission plan. Sarah noticed that several junior officers were looking uncomfortable, clearly recognizing that the Admiral was making changes without fully understanding the implications of those modifications. Lieutenant Rodriguez finally spoke up, his voice respectful but firm. "Sir, with respect, Commander Mitchell's intelligence package and operational timeline have been thoroughly vetted by my team. We've been training based on her specifications for the past 2 weeks, and we're confident in the approach she's developed." Admiral Hawthorne's expression hardened slightly at the SEAL officer's intervention. "Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, I appreciate your team's preparation, but strategic decisions need to be made by officers with the appropriate level of experience and perspective." The implication hung in the air like smoke from a fired weapon. Sarah felt the familiar sting of having her competence questioned not because of any deficiency in her work, but because of assumptions about her capabilities based on her gender. She had encountered this attitude throughout her career, but it never stopped hurting. The Admiral's next words would change everything in that briefing room and set in motion a series of events that would become legendary throughout the Naval Special Operations community. Sarah had no idea that within the next few minutes she would witness something that would restore her faith in the military brotherhood she had worked so hard to join. Admiral Hawthorne turned his attention directly to Sarah, his expression carrying the weight of decades of military tradition and the unmistakable air of someone who believed he was about to deliver an important lesson. The room fell silent as every person present recognized that something significant was about to happen. "Commander Mitchell," the Admiral began, his voice taking on a condescending tone that made several SEALs stiffen in their chairs. "I understand that you've put considerable effort into this mission planning, but I think it's important for everyone in this room to understand the difference between theoretical planning and real-world execution." Sarah maintained her composure, though her hands clenched slightly at her sides. She had heard variations of this speech before, usually from senior officers who felt threatened by her competence or uncomfortable with women in positions of tactical responsibility. She knew what was coming, but she was determined to maintain her professionalism regardless of how the Admiral chose to conduct himself. "You see," Admiral Hawthorne continued, warming to his theme as he began to pace in front of the assembled personnel, "combat operations require a level of intuition and experience that simply cannot be learned from intelligence reports and computer simulations. The men in this room have been in situations where split-second decisions mean the difference between life and death." Lieutenant Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw tightening as he recognized the direction of the Admiral's remarks. Behind him, other SEAL team members exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their growing displeasure with their superior officer's approach. "Commander Mitchell's academic approach to mission planning is certainly thorough," the Admiral said, managing to make thorough sound like a criticism rather than a compliment. "But warfare isn't conducted in conference rooms and computer labs. It happens in the mud and blood of real combat, where theoretical knowledge often proves inadequate." Sarah felt her cheeks flush slightly, but she maintained her professional expression. She had been in combat zones multiple times, had coordinated missions that saved hundreds of lives, and had earned the respect of every special operations team she had worked with. The Admiral's characterization of her experience was not only inaccurate, but deliberately insulting. "Perhaps," Admiral Hawthorne continued, his voice growing more patronizing with each word, "the commander might benefit from observing how experienced officers approach complex operations. There's a certain wisdom that comes from years of actual command experience that cannot be replicated through staff work and intelligence analysis." The insult was unmistakable now. The Admiral was essentially suggesting that Sarah's expertise was worthless, that her years of successful mission planning and execution meant nothing compared to his traditional understanding of military hierarchy. He was reducing her to a stereotype, the overeducated staff officer who lacked real-world experience. Master Chief Petty Officer Mike Bulldog Thompson, a 25-year Navy veteran and one of the most respected SEALs in the Pacific Fleet, slowly rose from his seat. His weathered face showed no emotion, but those who knew him recognized the dangerous calm in his movements. Thompson had served with Sarah on her first combat deployment 6 years ago, and he had watched her mature into one of the finest tactical minds in the Navy. "Sir," Master Chief Thompson said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that came from decades of leading men in the most dangerous situations imaginable, "with all due respect, Commander Mitchell has planned and coordinated more successful special operations missions than most officers see in their entire careers." Admiral Hawthorne turned to face the Master Chief, clearly annoyed at being interrupted during his lecture. "Master Chief Thompson, I'm sure the commander is a competent staff officer, but—" "Competent?" Thompson's voice cut through the Admiral's words like a blade. "Sir, Commander Mitchell saved my team's lives in Kandahar when her intelligence work identified an IED network that would have killed half my men. She coordinated the extraction in Somalia that brought home 12 hostages without firing a shot. That's enough, Master Chief," Admiral Hawthorne snapped, his face reddening with anger. "I don't need a lesson in personnel evaluation from an enlisted man." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Admiral Hawthorne had just made a critical error in military etiquette by dismissing the Master Chief's input in such a disrespectful manner. Master Chief Thompson was not just any enlisted man, he was a legend in the special operations community, a warrior who had earned his reputation through blood and courage in conflicts around the world. Lieutenant Rodriguez stood up slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. Admiral, Master Chief Thompson speaks for all of us when he vouches for Commander Mitchell's expertise. Her operational planning has never failed. Not once. We trust her judgment because she has earned that trust through proven results. Other SEALs began rising from their seats, one by one. Their movements synchronized not through any spoken command, but through a shared understanding of what was happening. These were men who had served together in the most elite units of the American military, and they recognized an injustice when they saw one. Admiral Hawthorne found himself facing a room full of standing special operations personnel, their silence more powerful than any spoken protest. The sight of America's most elite warriors rising in support of the officer he had been trying to belittle was both stunning and undeniable in its message. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Admiral Hawthorne demanded, his voice tight with anger and confusion. "Showing respect where respect is due, sir," Lieutenant Rodriguez replied calmly. "Commander Mitchell has earned our trust and our confidence through her exceptional service. We stand by officers who have proven themselves in combat, regardless of rank or gender." Sarah felt tears threatening to well up in her eyes, not from the Admiral's earlier comments, but from the overwhelming support being demonstrated by these warriors. She had spent years proving herself, fighting for acceptance in a male-dominated profession, and enduring subtle and not-so-subtle discrimination. To see these men, the most respected fighters in the American military, standing up for her, was more moving than she could have imagined. Petty Officer First Class Carlos Viper Mendez, a sniper whose reputation was legendary even among SEALs, spoke up from the back of the room. "Sir, Commander Mitchell's intelligence saved my spotter's life in Iraq. Her analysis identified enemy positions that our previous intel had missed. I've served with a lot of officers, and she's one of the finest tactical minds I've ever encountered." Other voices began joining in, each SEAL sharing a brief story of how Sarah's expertise had contributed to successful missions or saved lives. The testimonials were not emotional appeals, but factual accounts of professional competence and proven results. Admiral Hawthorne looked around the room, clearly realizing that his attempt to diminish Sarah had backfired spectacularly. He was facing a room full of America's most elite warriors, and they were unanimously rejecting his assessment of one of their own. "This is highly irregular," Admiral Hawthorne said, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. "So is disrespecting a proven combat leader," Master Chief Thompson replied quietly. "Sir, these men have served in more combat zones than most people can name. When they tell you that an officer has earned their respect, you might want to listen." The Admiral's face was now flushed with embarrassment and anger. He had intended to establish his authority and put a junior officer in what he perceived as her proper place. Instead, he had revealed his own prejudices and turned the most elite fighting unit in the Pacific Fleet against him. Sarah remained standing at attention, overwhelmed by the support but maintaining her military bearing. She understood that this moment was bigger than just her career or her feelings. These men were taking a stand on principle, defending the idea that competence and courage should be the only measures of a military leader's worth. The silence stretched on, heavy with tension and the weight of military tradition being tested against evolving standards of leadership and respect. What happened next would determine not just the outcome of Operation Neptune's Trident, but the future of Sarah's career and the Admiral's reputation within the special operations community. The tension in the briefing room was electric, with dozens of America's most elite warriors standing in silent solidarity with Commander Sarah Mitchell. Admiral Hawthorne found himself in an impossible position. He could either acknowledge his error or double down on his misguided attempt to assert authority through intimidation. Master Chief Thompson took a step forward, his massive frame casting a shadow across the front of the room. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of 25 years of honorable service and countless successful missions. "Admiral," Thompson said with measured respect, "I've served under 17 different commanding officers in my career. I've seen good leaders and bad leaders. The good ones recognize talent when they see it, regardless of where it comes from. The bad ones let their personal biases cloud their judgment and put missions at risk." The Master Chief's words hung in the air like a challenge. He wasn't directly insubordinate, but his message was unmistakable. Admiral Hawthorne was being given an opportunity to choose which type of leader he wanted to be remembered as. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward to stand beside Thompson. "Sir, Commander Mitchell's operational plan for Neptune's Trident is flawless. My team has studied every aspect of it, run simulations, and conducted rehearsals. We are ready to execute exactly as she designed it. Any modifications at this point would compromise the mission's success and endanger our personnel." Other SEAL team leaders began moving forward, forming a line of support behind Rodriguez and Thompson. These were men who had earned their positions through exceptional courage and proven competence in the most dangerous situations imaginable. Their unified stance was unprecedented in military protocol, but it was also undeniably powerful. Admiral Hawthorne looked around the room, seeing face after face of determined professionals who had clearly made their choice about where their loyalty lay. He was a decorated officer with an impressive record, but he was also outnumbered by people whose judgment he couldn't question without calling into doubt the entire Special Operations program. "Gentlemen," Admiral Hawthorne began, his voice strained as he attempted to regain control of the situation, "I appreciate your confidence in Commander Mitchell, but military discipline requires respecting the chain of command and trusting proven leaders," interrupted Captain James Hawk Morrison, the commanding officer of the entire SEAL detachment. Morrison had been sitting quietly in the back of the room, observing the interaction with growing concern. Captain Morrison stood and walked to the front of the room, his presence immediately commanding everyone's attention. He was a legendary figure in the Special Operations community, a man whose reputation for fairness and tactical brilliance was matched only by his fierce loyalty to his people. "Admiral," Captain Morrison said, his tone respectful but firm, "Commander Mitchell is under my operational command for this mission. Her planning has been reviewed and approved by myself and my staff. The SEALs have trained extensively based on her specifications, and they are prepared to execute the mission as designed." Morrison turned to face the assembled SEALs, his eyes moving from face to face as he took in the unprecedented display of solidarity. "Furthermore, I have complete confidence in every person in this room, from the most senior chief to the newest team member. We succeed because we trust each other, support each other, and judge each other solely on performance and character." The captain's words were a masterclass in military leadership. He had managed to support his people while still maintaining respect for the chain of command. He had also made it clear that he would not tolerate any undermining of his operational commanders, regardless of rank or gender. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude toward Captain Morrison, but she also knew that she needed to speak for herself. She had remained silent during the confrontation, maintaining military protocol, but the time had come for her to address the situation directly. "Admiral," Sarah said, stepping forward with perfect military bearing, "I appreciate your concerns about the mission complexity. However, I stand behind every aspect of the operational plan. I have personally verified every intelligence assessment, coordinated with all supporting units, and ensured that contingency plans are in place for every foreseeable scenario." Her voice was calm and professional, showing no trace of the emotions she had been feeling. The timeline I've established provides the optimal balance between mission success and personnel safety. The coordination requirements are necessary to ensure that all elements work together seamlessly. I am prepared to defend every decision I've made in the planning process. Admiral Hawthorne found himself facing not just a roomful of determined SEALs, but also a supremely confident officer who clearly knew her business. Sarah's calm professionalism in the face of his earlier condescension only served to highlight the inappropriateness of his behavior. Master Chief Thompson stepped forward again, this time moving to stand directly beside Sarah. "Admiral, I've got something to say, and I want everyone in this room to hear it." Thompson's voice carried the authority of a man who had earned his stripes through blood, sweat, and unwavering dedication. "Commander Mitchell saved my life and the lives of my teammates more times than I can count. Not with a weapon, but with her brain. Her intelligence work, her planning, her ability to see threats and opportunities that the rest of us miss. That's what keeps us alive out there." He paused, looking directly at Admiral Hawthorne. "Sir, I've been in the Navy for 25 years. I've served with hundreds of officers. Commander Mitchell is one of the finest leaders I've ever had the privilege to work with. Her gender has absolutely nothing to do with her competence, and anyone who suggests otherwise is wrong." The room erupted in quiet affirmations, as other SEALs voiced their agreement. "Hoo-yah, Master Chief," came from multiple voices, the traditional SEAL expression of support and solidarity. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward and, in a gesture that would become legendary in military circles, came to attention and rendered a perfect military salute directly to Sarah. "Commander Mitchell," he said in a voice that carried throughout the room, "SEAL Team 6 is honored to serve under your operational command." One by one, every SEAL in the room followed Rodriguez's example. They came to attention and saluted Sarah, their actions speaking louder than any words could. Master Chief Thompson's salute was sharp and precise, his weathered face showing the deep respect he felt for the young commander who had proven herself time and again. The sight of America's most elite warriors saluting a fellow officer in defiance of an admiral's disrespect was unprecedented. It was a moment that transcended military protocol and spoke to the deeper values of honor, respect, and recognizing excellence regardless of gender or rank. Admiral Hawthorne stood frozen, watching as his attempt to diminish Sarah had transformed into a powerful demonstration of support for everything she represented. The SEALs were not just saluting her personally, they were saluting the principle that competence and character were the only measures that mattered in military service. Captain Morrison stepped forward and added his own salute to the display. "Commander Mitchell has earned the respect and confidence of every person in this room through her exceptional service and proven results. Admiral, I recommend we proceed with the mission exactly as she has planned it." The message was clear and undeniable. Admiral Hawthorne could either accept the judgment of the most elite fighting unit in the American military, or he could continue to undermine an officer whose competence had been unanimously vouched for by the people who knew her work best. Sarah stood at attention, receiving the salutes with the dignity and grace that had marked her entire career. Tears threatened to overwhelm her, but she maintained her composure, understanding that this moment represented something larger than her personal vindication. These men were taking a stand for principles that would benefit every woman who followed in her footsteps. Admiral Hawthorne finally spoke, his voice noticeably different from the condescending tone he had used earlier. "Commander Mitchell," he said stiffly, "proceed with your mission plan as originally designed. I apologize for any confusion about the operational parameters." It wasn't a complete apology, but it was an acknowledgement that he had been wrong. More importantly, it was a capitulation that every person in the room recognized as such. The SEALs had won a victory not just for Sarah, but for the principle that respect must be earned through performance, not granted based on outdated assumptions about gender roles. Operation Neptune's Trident was executed exactly according to Sarah's specifications 3 days later. The mission was a complete success, with the target extracted safely and all personnel returned without casualties. The precision of the planning and the flawless execution became a case study taught in military academies for years to come. Admiral Hawthorne never again questioned Sarah's competence, and his behavior toward female officers noticeably improved after the confrontation. The story of the SEAL's salute spread throughout the military community, becoming a powerful symbol of how true leaders support and defend excellence regardless of gender. Sarah went on to become one of the youngest captains in Navy history, eventually commanding her own Special Operations Unit. She never forgot the lesson she learned that day about the power of principled people standing together against injustice. And she made sure to pass that lesson on to every young officer who served under her command. The legacy of that day lived on in the culture of the Special Operations community, where competence became the only currency that mattered, and where standing up for proven leaders became a point of honor that defined what it meant to be a true warrior.